As a creator growing a successful business, you may be thinking about raising capital so that you can fuel your scalability, reach more clients, gain traction in the market, and ultimately achieve your vision. But knowing where to start brings up far more questions than answers. And that's where we come in. We've worked with hundreds of creative businesses over the past 15 years to help them raise over $300 million while staying true to their values and achieving the vision that they set out with when they first got started. Because we get so many questions from creatives around the world working on scaling their business and wondering about raising capital, we've launched the first ever that we can find, Capital for Creators, a course designed for creators who are seeking to raise money from the right people and get mentorship from people who have been through that journey before. The first question to ask yourself as a creative founder is, what's my vision? What's my vision for the company, for my community, for the creative community? Do I want to make a lot of money and be super rich? Do I want to build $1 billion company? Or do I want to create good local jobs for creatives? What's really important about identifying your vision is understanding how you see your company making a difference in the world and what scale that difference is at. To be clear, there's no right or wrong answer here. You just need to identify your answer, the answer that will shape everything else that you do, because once you set your sight on a vision, we can help you get there as long as everyone is aligned. Speaking of alignment, another area where you want to make sure that you're aligned with your co-founders, and if you work with investors, your investors, are around your values. For example, are your core values tied to people and relationships? Maybe to the natural environment, Mother Earth? Maybe your core values are around being extremely successful, having a lot of money. Maybe it's all of those things. But values require you to take action so that you live your values. And when you raise the financing for your business and you build a company, the rubber hits the road when things go wrong and you have to make a choice that help you live your values. So one question you might ask yourself is, what are you willing to give? What are you not willing to give up? Where are you going to stand up? Who do you stand up for? When will you take a back seat and sort of shrug? All of these questions can help you identify, where do you stand when things get rough, and it will get rough when you're working with investors and scaling a company. Okay, so now you've done the hard thinking around what your vision is, which might change, what your values are, which probably won't change too much over your life or in the life of your business. But the next questions you need to start to tackle are tied much more to the business that you plan to build and investors who may be aligned and knowledgeable about the sector you're building in. The other question you need to figure out is this a business that you can scale enough that you'll generate financial returns for your investors? What kind of industry are you in? Is this a service business, a product business? If you can figure out your divine numbers, which we call for cost of customer acquisition and COGS and all of the things that you kind of can't get away from in a business, once you know your divine numbers, you can start to figure out, how scalable is this? How much money does it cost to scale this business? What will my profit be in comparison to my costs as I scale the business? If you're building a business that is really brand centric, you might need to raise a lot of money to outpace the competition. If you're building a business that needs large facilities like biomedical research facilities, you probably need to raise a lot of money so that you can build laboratories. But some businesses don't need a lot of capital. Some businesses don't need a lot of capital to scale. So figure out what business you're in, how it will look when you scale, what are your divine numbers, and how much money could you make so that you could have that return on investment for investors. All right, so you have now figured out vision, values, and you understand what kind of business you're building and how scalable it is. Knowing that a lot of this might change and your business might become even more scalable as you grow into the market and the market changes, you still need to now think about given what kind of business I'm running, what are the types of capital that might invest in my business? Understanding sources of capital is actually most easily done when you think about it through the lens of an investor. Here's the thing, investors really only see risk. There are lots of cartoons out there around the investor hearing people pitch them, and all they're hearing is a laundry list of problems and risks and fires they see you would have to put out. And that's okay because they're not wrong. Frankly, most businesses do fail. But they are looking at it from a perspective of what is the risk level, and risk goes down the older the business is versus how much money they would put in. So if you're working, for example, on a business that already has lots of growing sales and you don't have to put a lot of money in to get new customers coming through the door, you've figured out all your costs, you're ready to move into 2 or 3 new states. An investor hears that and thinks, okay, you've eliminated already a lot of the early risks. You have customers, you know your numbers, and you're figuring out your path to growth. That for them is less risky. They're putting money into something that has already been proven successful to an extent. So they're willing to put a little more money in. However, if you are just getting started and you maybe have 5 customers, they see a lot of risk because you haven't yet proven out what's your business model. Do people really want this product or service? And can you grow a business as things get challenging and now you have staff and insurance and overhead and delays with vendors? Are you able to overcome those challenges? So as a business grows, investors perceive less risk and are willing to put in more money. The types of capital, which is changing all the time, but generally fall into the buckets you see here, range and meet the level of risk where it's at. So early companies that work with, for example, angel investors often have to pay those angel investors more because the angel investors took a bigger risk. So if they win with you when the company grows and becomes successful, they expect more reward or return than if, for example, they had invested in a publicly traded company like General Motors. They're not going to get as much return because they didn't really take very much risk. Understanding the perspective of investors is essential to understand how to pitch them and how to have an authentic conversation with them about the risks that you will face with your business. Alongside the question of what type of capital is the question of how much money should you raise? And while it might feel exciting to think about raising $5 or $10 million, the reality is that if you raise too much money early on, later you will have to demonstrate that you multiplied the value of your company to more than the value that you raised, which puts a lot of companies out of business. So instead of raising lots or just some amount you picked out of a hat, the way that you want to figure out how much money you want to raise is 2. You first figure out how much money do you really need to generate what kind of return? What are you building? What will get you to the next level of business? You've probably heard people talk about raising seed capital, Series A, pre-seed, Series B, mezzanine level financing. There's lots of words that people use to describe levels of financing. But here's what you need to know. Most really great entrepreneurs raise as little as they can at the first tranche, and then they, after maybe a pre-seed or a seed, raise a Series A, again, raising as little as they have to so that they're not selling off big parts of their company and they're not getting themselves too far out on the branch. Figuring out how much to raise is a question of how much do you need to achieve what will get you to that next level of growth, and how much will the market bear? It depends on where investors are at. Is there a lot of capital in the market right now? Or are investors feeling hammered by a huge economic downturn? So how much do you need? Don't overestimate. And where is the market at? I was just mentioning how important it is to figure out the right amount of money to raise. And that is tied to what you will achieve with that money. Here's a dirty little secret. A lot of people like to ask for money for personnel, for staff, for salaries. And if you're a founder, there's a good chance you've been working dirt cheap or for no money at all. And so it's really understandable that when you're talking to somebody about putting in $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, you're saying, oh yeah, and I'm going to be paid. Of course you're going to be paid. And investors get that, but they don't want to invest in salaries. What they want to invest in is future value of the company or future revenue and profit. So instead of coming up with uses and results that look like, well, we'll have 52 people working at the company, you need to be able to communicate, we will have grown this value. For example, we grew our revenue by 87% and kept our costs growing at only 3% a year. That's a result that investors can say, okay, I get it. So the value of my money becomes greater through, of course, the human power you're building in the company to achieve the results. Figure out what those results are. And then the next piece is figuring out the KPIs, the key performance indicators. Think of that like a dashboard. So in your car, if you're driving from Chicago to Miami, you know it's a 3-day drive and you'd better drive about 700 miles a day. And so you have to drive at about 75 miles an hour. You use that set of key performance indicators to know if you're going to get to Miami in 3 days or not. So when your mom takes over and she's driving 10 miles an hour, you're thinking, okay, we're going to get to Miami next year, Mom, come on, because you have a set of indicators that tell you whether or not you're going to get to your destination on time. Those are the same kinds of indicators you can use in your business to communicate to investors, we are on track to achieve 87% because every quarter we do whatever, 17.7%. So match key performance indicators with a return on the value of their investment to convey to investors that you know how to use their money and you will use it to grow the value of your company. We started out this saying that you probably have a million questions, and I'm guessing I haven't answered even 10% of them. But here's the thing. Use the slides that I shared today as a roadmap for figuring out what you really do have to figure out to get started on the fundraising process. And if you want to join Capital for Creators, apply now. Space is limited. If you have questions, just email me. I love hearing from creators. You're the whole reason we do what we do.